From the dawn of civilization, humanity has grappled with the great mystery of what lies beyond our final breath, and in that grappling, we've built monuments to memory, to hope, and to the unyielding desire to be remembered. These structures, these ancient tombs, stand as silent sentinels of stories untold, dreams unlived, and legacies sealed in stone and shadow. Walk with me for a moment through the echoing chambers of Egypt's Valley of the Kings, where pharaohs rested amid gold and grandeur, or stand beneath the immense, man-made hills of China's Terracotta Army, where an emperor sought to command even in death. What secrets do these places hold? What fears, beliefs, and love drove people to carve such majesty into the earth? It's this profound, universal curiosity, this longing to touch the past and hear its whispers, that brings us together today. We are about to embark on a journey to 25 of the most enigmatic burial sites across time and terrain, places that defy explanation and ignite the imagination. From hidden crypts that challenge our understanding of ancient engineering to graves that guard mysteries which have baffled historians and archaeologists for centuries, each location tells a story not just of death, but of life, of cultures, conflicts, and the incredible lengths humans will go to honor, protect, and sometimes conceal what they hold sacred. You're not just watching a list, you're stepping into a world of wonder where every stone has a voice and every burial site is a riddle waiting to be unraveled. Together, we'll explore the silent questions hanging in the air of these sacred spaces, and perhaps in seeking answers, we'll come closer to understanding what it means to be human, to hope, to build, and to believe in something greater than ourselves. So let's begin this exploration, not as passive observers, but as fellow seekers drawn into one of history's most captivating puzzles. And so we arrive at our first destination, a monument so iconic that it has become synonymous with ancient mystery itself, the Great Pyramid of Giza. This isn't merely a tomb, it's a staggering feat of ambition that has dominated the skyline for over 4,500 years. Constructed as the eternal resting place for the pharaoh Khufu around 2500 BC, its statistics still beggar belief. We are looking at a structure composed of an estimated 2.3 million limestone blocks, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons, with some of the granite slabs in the king's chamber tipping the scales at a staggering 70 tons. The precision is what truly separates it from mere scale. The four sides of its base are almost perfectly aligned with the four cardinal directions, with a margin of error so slight it would be impressive even with modern GPS technology. For centuries, the prevailing theory was that it was built by a massive workforce of slaves using ramps of sand and brick, but this idea is increasingly challenged. The logistics of quarrying, transporting, and placing those immense blocks within a pharaoh's lifetime, with only copper tools and human muscle, seem almost impossible. This gap between what we know and what seems achievable has given rise to countless alternative theories. Some researchers propose the use of lost or advanced technologies, perhaps a form of concrete or sound levitation, while others suggest a much older, perhaps even pre-pharaonic origin for the structure. Then there is the central, haunting question: has the pyramid ever truly given up its primary secret? While a sarcophagus was found in the king's chamber, no actual body of Khufu, no mummy, has ever been discovered within. This profound absence fuels speculation that his remains might still lie hidden in a chamber yet to be found. Modern technology is now probing these ancient stones like never before. The Scan Pyramids project, using non-invasive techniques like muon radiography, has detected several significant voids within the pyramid, including a large void above the Grand Gallery. Are these simply structural gaps left by the builders to redistribute immense weight, or are we on the verge of a discovery that could rewrite history? The Great Pyramid stands not as a closed book, but as an open question, a silent, massive riddle carved in stone that continues to challenge our understanding of human capability. Yet for all its immense, silent grandeur, the Great Pyramid represents a mystery of scale and engineering. Our next tomb, however, offers a very different kind of enigma, one not of emptiness but of overwhelming, pristine abundance. It is a story that begins not in ancient times but in the modern era in 1922, when the world was captivated by a single name, Tutankhamun. The discovery of the boy king's tomb by British archaeologist Howard Carter is the stuff of legend, a tale of relentless obsession and a final, breathtaking payoff. After years of fruitless digging in the Valley of the Kings, with his financial backer Lord Carnarvon on the verge of withdrawing funding, Carter convinced him to fund one last season. His team uncovered a single step cut into the bedrock. What followed was a painstaking excavation that led to a sealed doorway. When Carter made a small hole and peered inside on November 26th, Lord Carnarvon anxiously asked if he could see anything. Carter's now iconic reply was, "Yes, wonderful things." That was a historic understatement. The antechamber was not a mere room. It was a time capsule, crammed from floor to ceiling with a chaotic jumble of exquisite objects. Gilded couches in the shape of monstrous animals, alabaster vases, dismantled chariots, and the king's own throne, glittering with gold and semi-precious stones. But the true marvel lay beyond another sealed doorway, the burial chamber itself housing the sarcophagus. Within it, the mummy of the young pharaoh lay undisturbed, his head covered by the solid gold death mask that has become the most recognizable artifact from the ancient world. This was an unprecedented find. While the pyramids had been looted clean in antiquity, Tutankhamun's tomb, hidden beneath the debris of later royal tombs, had survived virtually intact for over 3,200 years. It was a snapshot of pharaonic wealth frozen in time, yet the discovery was soon shrouded in a darker narrative, the so-called Curse of the Pharaohs. It began with the sudden death of Lord Carnarvon just a few months after the tomb was opened, the result of an infected mosquito bite. Sensationalist newspapers of the era eagerly linked his passing to a supposed curse inscribed on the tomb's doorway, warning that death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king. While no such inscription was actually found in Tutankhamun's tomb, the legend took firm root in the public imagination, fueled by the subsequent deaths of others connected to the excavation. In reality, most of the team, including Howard Carter himself, lived to a ripe old age debunking the supernatural myth. The curse was more a product of yellow journalism and a pervasive cultural fascination with the occult than any ancient Egyptian magic. Beyond the gold and the gossip, the tomb's true value is the profound window it provides into a tumultuous period of Egyptian history known as the Amarna period. Tutankhamun was the son of the heretic pharaoh Akhenaten, who had upended centuries of religious tradition by abolishing the pantheon of gods and forcing the worship of a single deity, the sun disk Aten. He moved the capital to a new city, Amarna, and plunged the kingdom into chaos. Tutankhamun, who ascended the throne as a child, was tasked with restoring order. His burial reflects this delicate political and religious restoration. The artifacts within are a fascinating blend. Some objects still bear the name of Aten, a holdover from his father's reign, while others are carefully re-inscribed with the name of the restored supreme god Amun. His tomb, though small and seemingly rushed, perhaps due to his unexpected death around the age of 18, was packed with everything the Egyptians believed he would need to successfully navigate the afterlife and reclaim his divine kingship. It was a desperate, lavish attempt to ensure stability continued beyond his tragically short life, a final plea for order from a civilization recovering from revolution. But the story of a young pharaoh and his glittering gold is only one facet of humanity's burial practices. For a display of power and paranoia on an entirely different scale, we must travel east to ancient China and to the silent, sun-baked hills outside the city of Xi'an. Here in 1974, a group of farmers digging a well made a discovery that would stun the world. Their shovels did not strike water, but instead hit the hardened clay head of a life-sized soldier, his stoic face staring back from the earth after more than 2,000 years. This was the first soldier of the now legendary Terracotta Army, the subterranean legion built to protect China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, in the afterlife. The sheer scale of the find is almost incomprehensible. Excavations have since revealed not one, but multiple pits containing an estimated 8,000 soldiers, each one unique, with individualized facial features, hairstyles, and expressions. They are not alone. This clay military corps is accompanied by hundreds of chariots and life-sized terracotta horses, as well as acrobats, strongmen, and bureaucrats, an entire imperial court frozen in clay. The craftsmanship is breathtaking. Each figure was built using an assembly line process with standardized parts for bodies but hand-sculpted, distinctive heads, making every soldier a one-of-a-kind artifact. They were also originally painted in vibrant, lifelike colors, though much of this pigment flaked off upon exposure to the air after their long burial. This immense project was the final command of a man consumed by a desire for eternal power. Qin Shi Huang was the ruthless unifier of China, a leader of immense ambition and equally immense paranoia. He spent much of his life searching for an elixir of immortality, but as a pragmatic backup plan, he ordered the construction of this vast mausoleum complex to replicate his earthly dominion for all eternity. The Terracotta Army was merely the outer guard, the perimeter defense for what ancient historians describe as a spectacular underground palace. His actual tomb remains a great, unexcavated mound a short distance away from the pits of his army. And this is where the mystery deepens into the realm of legend and legitimate scientific caution. The ancient historian Sima Qian, writing about a century after the emperor's death, described the main tomb chamber as a miniature universe, with pearls embedded in the ceiling to represent the stars and rivers of liquid mercury flowing across a model of the Chinese landscape. Most ominously, he wrote of crossbows set to shoot automatically at any intruder, a deadly booby trap system to protect the emperor's final resting place. Modern scientific surveys have indeed detected alarmingly high concentrations of mercury in the soil around the tomb mound, lending startling credibility to Sima Qian's account. The potential presence of these toxic rivers, combined with the fear of ancient traps and a deep respect for preserving the potentially fragile contents within, has led Chinese authorities to prohibit any excavation. The tomb of the first emperor, with all its purported wonders and dangers, remains sealed, a tantalizing treasure chest we can only imagine, protected by its silent clay sentinels and the very real specter of poison. Now we journey from the ordered legions of an emperor to a far more ancient and enigmatic structure, one that predates both the Great Pyramid and Stonehenge by centuries. In the rolling green countryside of Ireland's Boyne Valley stands Newgrange, a massive circular mound that from the outside appears to be a large grass-covered hill. But this is no natural formation. Built over 5,200 years ago, around 3,200 BC, by a sophisticated Neolithic farming community, Newgrange is a passage tomb of breathtaking complexity and intention. Its most staggering feature is not just its age, but its profound connection to the cosmos. The entrance to the tomb is guarded by a massive, intricately carved curbstone and a facade of white quartz rock, which was likely transported from a great distance. A long, narrow passageway lined with enormous stone slabs leads inward for over 60 feet into the heart of the mound. This corridor culminates in a cross-shaped chamber with a soaring corbelled vault roof, a technique where stones are layered inward until they meet at the top. This architectural marvel has kept the inner sanctum completely waterproof for millennia, a testament to the engineering genius of its builders. But the true magic of Newgrange reveals itself for just a few precious minutes each year at dawn on the winter solstice. Above the entrance is a small, ingeniously designed opening known as a roof box. As the sun rises on the shortest day of the year, a narrow beam of sunlight penetrates through this roof box, travels the entire length of the dark passageway, and finally illuminates the central chamber in a dramatic burst of golden light. This event lasts for approximately 17 minutes before the chamber returns to darkness, not to see direct sunlight again for another full year. This was no accidental feature. The precise alignment required to achieve this solar event demonstrates an incredibly advanced understanding of astronomy and solar cycles, a knowledge that we typically associate with much later civilizations. What was the purpose of this incredible light show? Archaeologists and historians believe it was deeply tied to the spiritual beliefs of its builders. For an agricultural society, the winter solstice marked the symbolic death and rebirth of the sun, the promise that the darkest days were over and that light, warmth, and life would return to the world. The illumination of the inner chamber, which holds the cremated remains of the dead, could have been a powerful ritual symbolizing the triumph of life over death, a moment where the spirits of the ancestors were literally reunited with the life-giving sun. It suggests a world where the cycles of human life, death, and rebirth were intimately woven into the very fabric of the celestial order. Adding another layer of mystery are the tomb's countless megalithic art carvings, particularly the recurring triple spiral motif found inside the chamber. These enigmatic symbols, carved with painstaking effort into the hard stone, are found nowhere else in the world in such concentration. Their meaning is lost to time, but theories abound. They could represent the solar cycle, a trinity of life, death, rebirth, or even a map of the heavens. Unlike the hieroglyphs of Egypt, which form a decipherable language, the spirals of Newgrange are a silent, abstract language of symbol and spirit, a permanent record of a complex belief system that we can only strive to interpret. This site forces us to re-evaluate the capabilities and spiritual depth of our Neolithic ancestors. This was not a primitive people. They were master astronomers, engineers, and artists who constructed a timeless monument to their dead and their gods, a Stone Age cathedral designed to capture a single, miraculous beam of light. Leaving behind the cosmic alignments of Newgrange, we travel to the vast, windswept plains of Pasargadae in modern-day Iran. Here stands a monument of an entirely different character, not a hidden mound or a lavish underground complex, but a solitary, dignified structure of pale limestone rising starkly against the sky. This is the alleged tomb of Cyrus the Great, the founder of the sprawling Achaemenid Persian Empire. In a world of colossal pyramids and hidden treasure, the power of this tomb lies in its profound and moving simplicity. It is a masterpiece of understatement, a quiet testament to a leader who changed the world. The architecture is elegantly straightforward yet deeply symbolic. The tomb consists of a modest gabled chamber sitting atop a pyramidal base of 6 steep steps. The entire structure is just over 35 feet tall. Those 6 steps are thought by many scholars to hold celestial or Zoroastrian significance, perhaps representing the levels of spiritual ascent or the 6 days of creation. Unlike the sealed, hidden tombs of Egypt, this mausoleum was designed to be seen and approached, a permanent part of the landscape and the living memory of the empire. The chamber itself was once open, meant to be accessible, and ancient sources like the Greek historian Arrian describe how it was once furnished with a golden sarcophagus, luxurious carpets and weapons, all maintained by a dedicated group of magi priests. This accessibility, however, is the very source of its central mystery. Did it ever truly hold the body of the great king? The historical accounts are compelling but not conclusive. Alexander the Great, upon conquering Persia, is said to have visited the tomb and paid his respects to the man he admired as a model ruler. He found it desecrated, its treasures looted, and ordered its immediate restoration. This story, passed down through historians, provides a tantalizing link to Cyrus himself. Yet, despite this ancient reverence, there is no definitive archaeological proof that his remains were ever inside. The chamber is, and has been for centuries, completely empty. The lack of any inscription explicitly naming Cyrus adds another layer of doubt, forcing us to rely on centuries of consistent tradition rather than hard evidence. The tomb's survival through millennia is a story in itself, a narrative of respect that transcends cultures and conquerors. When the armies of Islam swept through Persia, they could have easily destroyed this pre-Islamic monument. Instead, it was preserved and became known locally as the Tomb of Solomon's Mother, a clever recontextualization within an Islamic framework that saved it from destruction. Even in more recent times, it has survived earthquakes and the immense political upheavals of the region. Its endurance speaks to a unique and universal legacy. Cyrus is remembered not just as a Persian hero, but as a figure of tolerance famously captured on the Cyrus cylinder, which proclaimed freedoms for conquered peoples and has been called an early charter of human rights. His tomb, therefore, is not just a Persian landmark but a World Heritage Site, a symbol of a different kind of power, one based not on fear but on respect. It stands as a quiet, powerful question mark, asking us what truly makes a legacy and how a simple stone building can echo through history far louder than any golden treasure. Yet while the tomb of Cyrus speaks of a legacy built on tolerance and statesmanship, our next discovery reveals a far darker, more visceral vision of power and the afterlife. We now journey back even further in time to the very cradle of civilization itself, ancient Mesopotamia. Here, in the 1920s, a British archaeologist named Leonard Woolley made a discovery so lavish and so shockingly brutal that it would forever change our understanding of early Sumerian royalty. The site was the city of and what Woolley unearthed there were not simple graves, but elaborate, terrifying spectacles of wealth and devotion known as the royal tombs. Woolley's excavation was a masterpiece of meticulous archaeology. As his team dug down through layers of history, they reached a sterile layer of clay, which he correctly interpreted as evidence of the Great Flood, a cataclysm immortalized in later epics like the story of Gilgamesh. Beneath this layer, he found a cemetery, and within it, 16 tombs that stood apart from all the others due to their construction and unimaginable contents. These were the royal tombs dating back to around 2500 BC, a period known as the Early Dynastic. They were stone-built chambers set deep at the bottom of large pits accessed by ramps. The walls of these tombs were lined with limestone and plaster, creating a secure vault for eternity, but it was the objects within that truly stunned the world. The royalty of were buried with a staggering accumulation of wealth meant to accompany them into the next world. Woolley discovered helmets, weapons, and vessels of solid gold, so finely crafted and beaten to such a thinness that they demonstrated a goldsmithing skill that would not be surpassed for centuries. There were exquisite pieces of jewelry inlaid with lapis lazuli, a vibrant blue stone imported from far-off Afghanistan, and carnelian from the Indus Valley, speaking to vast trade networks. One of the most famous artifacts is the so-called Standard of a mosaic of shell, red limestone, and lapis lazuli depicting scenes of war and peace, offering a vibrant narrative of Sumerian life. Another breathtaking find was a beautifully crafted lyre, its sound box adorned with the fearsome head of a bull made of gold and lapis lazuli, a silent instrument that once provided music for courtly entertainment and presumably royal rites. However, this splendor was juxtaposed with a practice that modern sensibilities find deeply unsettling: ritual human sacrifice on a grand scale. Woolley termed the areas surrounding the main burial chambers the death pits. These were not filled with haphazard remains. They contained orderly rows of skeletons, all carefully arranged and adorned with the elaborate headdresses and ornaments of courtiers. There were soldiers with their weapons, women in fine court dress, and musicians with their instruments. Crucially, there were no signs of struggle or violence. Chemical analysis conducted much later would reveal these individuals did not die by poison. Instead, the leading theory is that they willingly ingested a sedative or poison, and then laid down in their designated places to accompany their king or queen into the afterlife. This was not a massacre, it was a meticulously planned and executed religious ceremony, a mass act of devotion. The entire retinue, from charioteers to handmaidens, was sent to continue their service beyond the grave. This practice offers a profound, if chilling, window into the Sumerian worldview. For them, the afterlife was not a paradise to be welcomed, but a dark, gloomy underworld often referred to as the land of no return. It was a place where all souls, royal and common, went to exist in a shadowy, diminished state. To face this bleak eternity, a ruler needed every advantage possible: their wealth, their status symbols, and most importantly, their entire courtly administration. The sacrifice of the retinue was the ultimate insurance policy, ensuring the king or queen would not face the unknown alone and powerless, but would arrive with their entire support system intact, ready to command and be served for all eternity. The royal tombs of Ur stand as a powerful, complex testament to a culture that combined breathtaking artistic achievement with a stark, unwavering belief in the absolute power of their divine rulers, even over life and death itself. From the grandeur of Ur's royal death pits, we now turn to a tomb so magnificent that its very name became synonymous with grand burial structures for all time: the mausoleum at Halicarnassus. This wasn't just a tomb, it was a statement, a declaration of power and cultural fusion so audacious that it earned its place among the original 7 wonders of the ancient world. The story begins not with a pharaoh or an emperor, but with a Persian satrap named Mausolus. As the ruler of Caria in Asia Minor, nominally under the control of the Persian Empire, Mausolus was a master of playing both sides. He embraced Greek culture, language, and art while simultaneously expanding his own territory and wealth through shrewd political maneuvering. His ambition, however, extended far beyond his lifetime. Around 353 BC, Mausolus embarked on a project to build himself a tomb unlike any the world had seen. He chose his capital city, Halicarnassus, now the modern Turkish town of Bodrum, as the site. Tragically, he died before its completion, leaving his formidable wife and sister, Artemisia II, to see the monumental task through. Her profound grief and dedication to his legacy are legendary, with some ancient sources even claiming she mixed his ashes into her daily drink as a final act of devotion. Whether fact or folklore, this tale underscores the immense personal and cultural importance placed upon this structure. The design of the mausoleum was a revolutionary blend of architectural styles, a true reflection of Mausolus's own blended identity. It wasn't purely Greek, nor was it purely Persian or Egyptian. It was a breathtaking synthesis. The structure rose from a massive rectangular base, a podium that itself was said to be as large as some minor temples. On top of this base stood a colonnade of 36 Ionic columns, creating a graceful, open area. Above this colonnade was a solid, step pyramid roof, crowned at its very peak by a monumental, intricately sculpted marble chariot, pulled by 4 massive horses and carrying statues of Mausolus and Artemisia. This staggering monument reached a height of approximately 140 feet, dominating the city's skyline and the harbor for all to see. But perhaps its most lasting contribution to art was its extensive and breathtaking sculptural program. Artemisia, determined to create the finest monument possible, hired the 4 most renowned Greek sculptors of the age: Scopas, Bryaxis, Timotheus, and Leochares, each assigned to decorate one side of the building. The result was a continuous frieze of spectacular reliefs depicting scenes from Greek mythology, like the battle between the Greeks and the Amazons, alongside life-sized and larger-than-life freestanding statues. These included not only the rulers in their chariot but also magnificent lions and incredibly detailed portraits of Greeks and Persians, all standing guard. The blending of cultural motifs and the sheer virtuosity of the carving set a new standard for monumental art. For roughly 16 centuries, the mausoleum stood as an awe-inspiring landmark, a testament to a ruler's ambition and a widow's love. Its fate, however, was sealed not by human hands but by nature. A series of devastating earthquakes in the medieval period between the 12th and 15th centuries finally toppled the wonder, reducing the once proud structure to a ruinous heap of marble and rubble. For a time, its broken pieces remained on the site, a melancholy reminder of its former glory. Then, in the 15th century, the Knights of St. John arrived, fortified the area, and began quarrying the ruins to build their castle of St. Peter. They literally burned the remaining sculpted marble in their kilns to extract lime for mortar, systematically destroying much of what the earthquakes had left behind. It is a deeply ironic tragedy that the stones of one of the world's most beautiful tombs were ground down to serve as mere cement for a fortress. The story of the mausoleum, however, does not end with its dissolution into lime and mortar. In the 19th century, the site was rediscovered and excavated by the British archaeologist Charles Newton. His team unearthed the foundation trench, the broken remains of the staircase leading to the tomb chamber, and most importantly, a treasure trove of sculptural fragments that had escaped the knights' lime kiln. These included massive sections of the magnificent frieze, colossal statues of Mausolus and Artemisia, and perhaps the most iconic survivor, the beautiful and powerful statue of a horse from the chariot group. Following the common practice of the era, these finds were shipped to London, where they became and remain one of the crown jewels of the British Museum's collection. To walk through those galleries today is to come face to face with the shattered brilliance of Halicarnassus. You can run your eyes along the intricate muscles of the Amazonamaki frieze and stand in the shadow of the colossal, stoic statue believed to be Mausolus himself, his expression forever fixed in stone. The mausoleum itself is gone, but its artistic soul lives on, scattered across museums but forever immortalized by the very word its grandeur inspired, mausoleum. Leaving behind the scattered stones of Halicarnassus, we venture into the very heart of Greek legend, to a place where myth and history collide with the force of a thunderbolt. In the sun-baked hills of the Peloponnese stands the ancient citadel of Mycenae, the legendary home of King Agamemnon, leader of the Greek forces in the Trojan War. And just outside its massive cyclopean walls, built into the side of a hill, lies one of the most awe-inspiring structures to survive from the Bronze Age, a monumental beehive tomb known for centuries as the Treasury of Atreus. The name itself is a powerful piece of mythological branding, linking the structure to Atreus, the father of Agamemnon, and suggesting untold riches waiting within. But the reality of this tomb is in many ways even more impressive than the legend. Approaching the tomb, the first thing that strikes you is the sheer, staggering scale of its entrance. A long, walled corridor called a dromos, open to the sky, leads you towards the facade. This doorway is nothing short of monumental. It is framed by massive, precisely cut stone blocks, and above it hangs the largest single piece of stonework in the entire ancient world, a lintel block estimated to weigh a staggering 120 tons. The effort required to quarry, transport, and hoist this single slab into place over 3,000 years ago is a testament to an engineering prowess that seems almost superhuman. But above this lintel is the tomb's most ingenious architectural feature, a relieving triangle. This is an empty, triangular space carved out of the masonry above the lintel, which was then cleverly hidden behind a facade of ornate red and green marble columns. This brilliant design diverted the immense weight of the earth-filled hill away from the doorway, ensuring its stability for millennia. This wasn't just brute force, it was applied physics of the highest order. Stepping through that giant doorway is a moment that feels less like entering a building and more like walking into the earth itself. You find yourself inside a vast circular chamber soaring 43 feet high. This is the tholos, the beehive dome, that gives this type of tomb its name. The construction technique is known as corbelling. Each successive ring of stones is laid slightly inward from the one below it, creating a perfectly parabolic dome that curves gracefully upward until it is capped by a single stone at the peak. The interior walls were once adorned with thousands of bronze rosettes, glittering in the light like a fixed, starry firmament, transforming this burial chamber into a miniature cosmos for the dead. A small, rectangular doorway off the main chamber leads to a smaller, more intimate side room, the actual burial cell where the body and grave goods would have been placed. So, did this magnificent structure ever hold the body of the legendary Agamemnon? The short and perhaps disappointing answer is almost certainly not. The tomb was constructed around 1250 BC during the zenith of Mycenaean power. The floorroot of the historical figure that might have inspired the Agamemnon legend, however, would have been later, around the time of the traditional date for the Trojan War, which is usually placed around 1184 BC. By that time, this particular tomb was already generations old. When the famous archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann excavated the royal graves inside the citadel of Mycenae in 1876, he was so overcome by the magnificent gold death masks he found that he famously telegrammed the king of Greece, proclaiming, "I have gazed upon the face of Agamemnon." He was wrong on that count too. Those shaft graves were centuries older than the Trojan War hero. The treasury of Atreus, like the other 8 large tholoi found around Mycenae, was likely the resting place of a powerful, yet nameless Mycenaean wanax or king, whose true identity is lost to time. The romantic name is a beautiful misattribution, a layer of legend added by later Greeks who gazed upon the colossal ruins of a bygone age and could not conceive that anyone but their greatest heroes could have built them. Yet the true legacy of the treasury of Atreus is not who was buried there, but the profound shadow it cast across the centuries. Its architectural brilliance did not die with the collapse of the Bronze Age. The basic form of the tholos tomb was revived and refined centuries later by the classical Greeks. You can see its direct lineage in the beautiful and sophisticated tholoi at the sanctuary of Delphi and at Epidaurus, structures that served as treasuries and sacred spaces rather than tombs. Even more significantly, the Romans, masters of architectural appropriation, studied and adopted the corbelling technique, scaling it up to unprecedented sizes using concrete to create the vast, soaring domes of the Pantheon and countless other buildings that would define their empire. The treasury of Atreus stands as a timeless monument to human ambition, a whisper from a lost age that continued to echo through the halls of history, inspiring generations of builders long after the name of its original occupant had been forgotten. This grim discovery shifts our focus from the silent terracotta guardians to a far more human and tragic story written in bone and earth. For all the grandeur of Qin Shi Huang's planned eternity, the period immediately following his death was one of brutal, paranoid, and bloody political reality. While his main tomb remained sealed, archaeologists working in the broader mausoleum complex made a chilling find: a cluster of graves that contained not terracotta warriors, but the skeletal remains of young men and women. The evidence suggests these were no commoners. The location, so close to the emperor's own resting place, and the remnants of lavish burial goods pointed to a far more sinister identity. These were likely the sons and daughters of the first emperor himself, murdered in a ruthless power struggle. The historical context provided by the Great Han Dynasty historian Sima Qian paints a vivid and horrifying picture of the court intrigue that unfolded after the emperor's passing. Qin Shi Huang died while on a tour of the eastern parts of his empire. His chief eunuch Zhao Gao and his prime minister Lai Si conspired to conceal his death to prevent unrest during the long journey back to the capital. This conspiracy went far beyond a simple cover-up. The emperor's eldest son and rightful heir, Fusu, was seen as a threat to their power. They forged a royal decree that forced Fushu to commit suicide, clearing the path for a more pliable younger son, Hu Hai, to be placed on the throne as the second emperor. But securing the throne for a puppet ruler required more than just eliminating the primary heir. It demanded the eradication of any potential rival who could challenge the new emperor's legitimacy. In the brutal political logic of the time, every other sibling of Hu Hai represented a threat, a possible focal point for rebellion or dissent. The historical records state that Hu Hai, under the guidance of the manipulative Zhao Gao, ordered the execution of his brothers and sisters. The princes were forced to take their own lives, while the princesses, the emperor's own daughters, are believed to have been subjected to a particularly gruesome fate, being torn apart by chariots in a public display of power meant to terrify any would-be opponents. The archaeological discovery near the tomb provides a silent, grim corroboration of these ancient texts. The skeletons found in these mass graves are of young people, consistent with the ages of the emperor's children. The haphazard and crowded nature of some burials suggests a period of swift, violent purge rather than dignified, individual interment. For some, their skulls showed clear evidence of blunt force trauma, while others had bronze arrows embedded in their bones, telling a story of a violent end that matches the historical accounts of execution. This is not just a tale from a history book, it is a story written in physical trauma on the bones of the victims themselves. This tragic episode reveals the terrifying paradox at the heart of the Qin dynasty. This was the regime that unified China, standardized its writing and currency, and began the Great Wall, achievements of breathtaking administrative and military genius. Yet, the same absolute power that built an empire could also be turned inward with horrific cruelty. The purge of the royal children shows a court culture where paranoia was paramount and human life, even the lives of the most privileged, was utterly expendable in the pursuit of political control. The Terracotta Army was built to protect the emperor from supernatural threats in the afterlife. But the massacre of his children shows that the most immediate and devastating dangers came from the mortal world he left behind, from the very courtiers and family members who surrounded him. It is a stark reminder that for all the glory of ancient empires, their foundations were often cemented with blood and betrayal. From the grand political purges of an ancient Chinese dynasty, we plunge into a world of deep, silent water and a mystery that is both intimate and utterly chilling. Our journey now takes us to a barren, submerged landscape in southern Sweden, to a place known as Canal Jordan. Here, around 8,000 years ago, at a time when Europe was still cloaked in vast primordial forests and humanity lived as hunter-gatherers, a community performed a burial rite so strange and violent it defies easy comprehension. This is not a tomb of gold or grandeur, but one of water, wood, and bone, the tomb of the sunken skulls. The site was discovered quite by accident during an archaeological survey prior to the construction of a new railway line in 2009. What the team initially found at the bottom of what was once a small lake was a dense layer of large stones, clearly placed there by human hands. As they carefully excavated beneath this stone packing, they uncovered something that must have made them pause in stunned silence: the skulls of at least 11 individuals. But these were not arranged neatly or buried with care. At least 2 of the skulls still had wooden stakes driven straight through them from the base of the skull and out through the top of the cranium. Other skulls showed signs of having been mounted, likely displayed in a similar gruesome fashion before being laid to rest at the bottom of this lake. This was not a typical burial, it was a carefully staged deposition, a ritual frozen in time at the bottom of a Mesolithic lake. Forensic analysis of the bones reveals a story of trauma and careful selection. The remains belonged to both men and women, mostly adults, though one skull was from an infant. The violence they endured was not a single event. Many of the skulls show evidence of healed blunt force trauma, old wounds these individuals had survived years before their deaths. But then there were the fatal injuries. Several skulls had sustained massive, unhealed trauma from blows to the head, likely from a stone axe or club, injuries that would have been instantly lethal. One male skull even had a piece of another person's skull embedded in it, a ghastly detail suggesting extreme interpersonal violence. This tells us these people experienced violence at least twice in their lives, once years before from which they recovered, and a final, fatal attack. Perhaps the most perplexing detail is what is missing. Archaeologists found no other bones from these individuals, no rib cages, no leg bones, no pelvises. Just the skulls and a few vertebrae still attached. This is clear evidence of a complex funerary practice that involved defleshing and dismemberment. These bodies were processed after death. The heads were deliberately separated from the bodies, which have never been found. The stakes were then meticulously worked through the foramen magnum, the large hole at the base of the skull where the spinal cord enters. This requires precise knowledge of anatomy and significant effort. This was not a haphazard act of desecration by enemies. It was a deliberate, ritualized performance by people who knew exactly what they were doing. So what does this macabre scene mean? Why would a community go to such lengths? The leading theory is that we are witnessing the aftermath of a violent conflict, perhaps a raid or a battle between rival groups. The display of the skulls on stakes at the lake's edge could have been a powerful trophy display, a warning to others, or a way to dominate and dishonor defeated foes. The water itself was likely deeply significant in their spiritual worldview. In many hunter-gatherer societies, lakes and wetlands were seen as liminal spaces, portals to the spirit world. Depositing these powerful, potentially dangerous remains in the water could have been a way to neutralize their spiritual power or send them to the ancestors. Yet another possibility is that this was not about enemies at all, but about their own people. The evidence of old, healed injuries suggests a community where violence was a recurring part of life. These could be the skulls of revered warriors, ancestors, or even individuals perceived as dangerous in death, treated in this extreme way to ensure their power was controlled or harnessed for the community's benefit. The inclusion of a single infant skull deepens the mystery, suggesting the ritual's rules were complex and perhaps included notions of kinship or inherited status. The Tomb of the Sunken Skulls offers no easy answers. It provides a raw, unfiltered, and deeply unsettling window into the Mesolithic mind, a world where ritual, violence, and belief in the supernatural were inextricably intertwined, reminding us that the human capacity for ceremony and savagery is truly ancient. But from the silent, watery depths of a Mesolithic lake, we now emerge into the radiant, sun-baked coastal deserts of northern Peru, where a discovery of breathtaking opulence and human drama was waiting just beneath the surface. It was 1987, and archaeologist Walter Alva was facing a nightmare scenario. His local museum had been looted, and priceless artifacts from the ancient Moche culture were appearing on the black market. Following the trail, Alva and his team were led to a large mud brick platform pyramid known as Huaca Rajada near the modern town of Sipon. The looters had already tunneled deep into the structure, but they had missed something crucial. What followed was one of the most spectacular and intact archaeological discoveries ever made in the Americas, the tomb of a Moche ruler now known as the Lord of Sipon. The excavation was a painstaking race against time and further looting. As they carefully dug down, they breached the roof of a burial chamber. Peering inside, Alva and his team were met with a sight that left them speechless. There, surrounded by an almost unimaginable wealth of gold, silver, and precious stones, was the skeletal remains of a man laid to rest on his back. He was not alone. Flanking him were the skeletons of two young women, likely wives or concubines, and at his feet the remains of a guard still holding a shield. Just outside the main chamber, they found two more bodies, a child and a powerful-looking man who may have been a military commander, and in a separate niche the skeleton of a llama, probably intended as a food source for the journey ahead. This was not a mere grave, it was a carefully composed scene, a royal court frozen in time for its journey into the afterlife. The regalia adorning the Lord himself was a testament to his immense power and semi-divine status. He wore a magnificent headdress made of gold and silver, featuring a huge crescent-shaped ornament and an array of gold feathers. His face was covered by a solid gold nose plate, and massive gold ear spools, intricately worked, stretched his earlobes. His neck was adorned with multiple necklaces, one made of superb peanut beads, 10 in gold and 10 in silver, symbolizing the Moche concept of duality and balance. His hands held gold and silver scepters, and his body was covered in a back flap, a large piece of armor like gold ornamentation. Every single item was a masterpiece of metallurgy and artistry, demonstrating the Moche's incredible skill in working metals, their knowledge of electroplating, and their sophisticated symbolic language. This discovery was monumental because, for the first time, archaeologists had an undisturbed context for the incredible Moche artifacts that had been looted for decades. The Moche, who flourished between about 100 and 800 AD, left no written records. Their history was told through their art, found on intricate pottery, often depicting scenes of warfare, ritual, and mythology. One of the most common and enigmatic figures in this art was the warrior priest, a seemingly powerful figure shown capturing prisoners in battle and then presiding over a ceremony where he consumes a cup of blood. For years, scholars debated whether this figure was a mythological god, a symbolic representation, or a real person. The Lord of Supon provided the definitive answer. Buried with him were exactly the same regalia: the crescent headdress, the back flap, the ornate cups worn by the warrior priest in the ceramic depictions. The man in the tomb was not just a king, he was the living embodiment of this ritual role, a ruler who performed these sacred and likely brutal ceremonies to maintain the cosmic order for his people. The wealth of his tomb also revealed the vast economic and territorial power of the Moche. The gold likely came from the highlands, the silver from the coast, the lapis lazuli from Chile, and the exotic seashells from Ecuador. The Lord of Supon controlled a far-reaching network of trade and tribute. Subsequent excavations at the same site revealed other rich tombs, including those of an older ruler dubbed the Old Lord of Supon and a religious figure known as the priest. This established Huacarojota as a major dynastic cemetery, providing a unique genealogical record of Moche elite power spanning generations. The discovery fundamentally rewrote our understanding of early Peruvian civilizations, proving they developed complex theocracies with powerful, wealthy rulers long before the Inca Empire ever rose. The Lord of Supon's tomb is a time capsule that gave a voice to a silent culture, allowing its art to finally be read as history and its greatest leader to step out of legend and into the light. While the tombs of kings and warriors speak of power won on the battlefield, our next discovery tells a quieter, yet profoundly moving story of resilience, innovation, and the startling humanity that could flourish even in the so-called Dark Ages. We travel now to a small village church in Poland, where an archaeological excavation in 2019 uncovered a grave that would completely reshape our understanding of medieval life and compassion. This was not the tomb of a queen, but of a woman who, through a devastating injury, had been given a second chance at life and dignity through a remarkable feat of early medicine and craftsmanship. Her skeleton was found in a cemetery dated to the 12th or 13th century, a time when Europe was a patchwork of feudal territories and life was often brutal and short. The initial analysis of her remains revealed the cause of her incredible story: evidence of a traumatic amputation of her left hand. The bones of her forearm showed clear, precise surgical marks, indicating the hand had been removed with a clean, professional cut, likely to save her life after a severe injury or infection. This in itself was a revelation, proving a level of sophisticated surgical knowledge in medieval Poland that many historians had previously underestimated. But the true marvel was what was found placed where her hand should have been. Nestled against the bones of her arm were the delicate, intricately crafted remains of a prosthetic replacement, made not of iron or simple wood, but of beautifully fashioned sheets of thin silver. This was no crude peg. The prosthetic was a hollow, sculpted casing designed to mimic the shape and form of a human hand, complete with separate, articulated fingers. It was constructed from a biodegradable material, perhaps leather or fabric, which had long since decayed, but this base had been carefully sheathed and reinforced with the precious silver plates. A tiny eyelet on the wrist area suggests it may have been tied or fastened to her arm with a delicate cord. The care and expense invested in this object are what make the discovery so extraordinary. Silver was a valuable commodity, far too precious to be wasted on a mere symbolic gesture for a corpse. This was a functional, sophisticated prosthetic device meant to be worn in daily life. It was her tool for interacting with the world, a piece of assistive technology that was both medical and social. But what does this tell us about her? The forensic analysis of her skeleton provides some clues. She lived to a relatively old age for the period, perhaps into her 50s or 60s, meaning she survived for decades after her amputation. This longevity is a powerful testament to the success of the surgery and the care she received afterward. The absence of infection in the bone suggests the wound was kept clean and healed well. Furthermore, her burial within the consecrated ground of the church cemetery and right next to the church walls, a privileged spot often reserved for the local elite or particularly pious individuals, strongly indicates she was a woman of high social standing and respect within her community. She was not shunned or hidden away due to her disability. She was valued and integrated. The Silver Hand Lady, as she has come to be known, forces us to completely re-evaluate the medieval approach to disability and medicine. This was not an era of universal barbarism and ignorance as it is sometimes portrayed. Her story reveals a society capable of remarkable empathy and technical skill. A skilled surgeon knew how to perform a life-saving amputation. A meticulous metalsmith had the artistry to craft a complex and beautiful prosthetic, and a community had the compassion to support and honor a member who lived with a physical difference. She represents a confluence of science, art, and humanity that we seldom associate with the Middle Ages. She is a powerful reminder that even 1,000 years ago, people understood the profound need to restore not just function, but also identity and grace to those who had suffered. Yet the profound humanity of the Silver Hand Lady stands in stark contrast to the colossal, impersonal ambition of our next destination. A tomb built not for a respected community member, but for a figure of world-altering power and legend. We travel now to northern Greece, to a place that was once the frontier of the ancient Macedonian kingdom, and we shift our focus from a single grave to a vast, mysterious burial complex that has become one of the most electrifying archaeological puzzles of the 21st century. This is the magnificent and enigmatic tomb of Amphipolis, discovered in 2012 and fully excavated in 2014. The scale of this tomb immediately signaled that this was no ordinary burial. The entire structure is the largest ever found in Greece, dwarfing even the famous royal tombs at Vergina. It is a breathtaking architectural statement, built into a massive mound that was originally encircled by a stunning 497-meter-long wall made of gleaming white marble from the island of Thasos. The entrance alone is a declaration of importance, flanked by two beautifully carved, life-sized sphinxes, their wings folded, their gaze forever guarding the secrets within. Their presence alone marked this as a tomb of immense royal significance, as sphinxes were traditional protectors of the dead in Macedonian royalty. To pass the sphinxes is to enter a world of staggering artistry and symbolic power. A long, vaulted corridor leads to a series of 3 separate chambers, each sealed by massive marble doors that were found mysteriously walled up with stone blocks from the inside, a detail that continues to baffle archaeologists. The first chamber is guarded by another pair of monumental sculptures, two exquisite caryatids, female figures carved from Thasian marble, who stand over 2.27 meters tall. They are masterpieces of classical sculpture, their intricate drapery and serene, powerful expressions echoing the caryatids of the Erechtheion on the Athenian Acropolis. They don't just hold up the entrance, they command respect, representing the gateway between the world of the living and the world of the dead. But it is in the second chamber that the tomb's narrative reaches its breathtaking climax. Here, covering the entire floor, archaeologists uncovered a sprawling mosaic of unparalleled beauty and complexity. It depicts the abduction of Persephone by the god Hades, a powerful myth central to ancient Greek beliefs about the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The god, crowned with a laurel wreath and standing in his chariot, is shown seizing the terrified goddess. The artist used tiny, meticulously placed pebbles in a stunning range of colors to create a scene of immense drama and movement. The figure of Hermes, the psychopomp who guided souls to the underworld, leads the way, his winged sandals clearly visible. This was not mere decoration. It was a profound theological statement, a visual prayer for the safe passage and eventual rebirth of the soul within. And then, in the third and final chamber, after carefully removing thousands of cubic meters of sand that had prevented looting, the excavators made their most anticipated discovery, a magnificent marble sarcophagus. But when they lifted its heavy lid, they found not the expected skeleton of a king or queen, but only the fragmentary, cremated remains of 5 individuals, a woman over 60, 2 men aged between 35 and 45, a newborn infant, and the bones of a cremated adult of indeterminate sex, along with animal remains from a funeral sacrifice. This shocking find, or lack thereof, is the very heart of the Amphipolis mystery. Who were these people, and why were they buried together in a tomb of such unimaginable expense and grandeur, a project that would have drained the treasury of a city? The dating of the tomb is crucial, placing its construction in the last quarter of the 4th century BC, right in the tumultuous years following the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC. This was a time of immense power struggles among his surviving generals, known as the Diadochi. The sheer cost and prominence of the tomb mean it could only have been built for someone at the absolute zenith of power, someone directly connected to Alexander himself. The leading theory, championed by the head excavator Katerina Peristri, is that this was the final resting place of Alexander's beloved mother, Olympias. A formidable and ruthless political player, Olympias was eventually killed by the family of Cassander, one of Alexander's generals who took control of Macedonia. Cassander denied her a proper burial, so the theory goes that one of her supporters, perhaps even her grandson, later built this incredible secret tomb to secretly honor her and give her the magnificent resting place she was denied. Other compelling candidates include Alexander's own wife, Roxana, and their young son, Alexander IV, who were both murdered by Cassander and secretly disposed of. Could this tomb be their hidden memorial, or perhaps it was built for one of Alexander's most revered generals and close friends, Hephaestion, whose death devastated the king? The problem is that the historical records are frustratingly silent on the final fates of nearly all these figures. The tomb at Amphipolis is a monument without a clear name, a locked box from a period of history where the key has been lost. The debate is far from settled, with intense academic arguments over every detail, from the style of the sculptures to the political implications of its location. It stands as a glorious, silent enigma, a testament to the lost world of Alexander and the titanic figures who fought to control his legacy, their own stories perhaps forever intertwined with the fragmented bones resting in its magnificent, silent heart. Yet from the grand, unresolved mystery of Amphipolis, we make a profound shift in both time and purpose. We move from ancient tombs built for singular, named individuals of immense fame to a monument of an entirely different kind, one that embraces anonymity as its very essence. This is not a tomb for a king, but for every soldier. It is a sacred space that represents the ultimate sacrifice made not by a single figure, but by countless thousands who vanished into the chaos of modern warfare, their identities erased by the brutal machinery of battle. We arrive now at a different kind of enigmatic burial, one whose power lies not in who is buried there, but in who might be. This is the universal story of the tomb of the unknown soldier. The concept was born from the unimaginable scale of loss during the First World War. For the first time in history, industrial warfare consumed millions of lives with a terrifying efficiency that often left no remains to identify. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers were simply listed as missing, their bodies pulverized by artillery, sunk into the mud of the trenches, or buried in mass graves as unknown casualties. This created a unique and profound grief for nations across the world, a mourning without a focal point, without a grave to visit, without the closure that comes from laying a loved one to rest. How does a country grieve for so many lost sons who have no marker? The answer was a powerful, symbolic act, the creation of a single, collective grave for one individual who would represent them all. The selection process for this unknown warrior was itself a deeply moving ritual, designed to ensure the complete and sacred anonymity of the chosen one. In many nations, the process was meticulously staged. Several bodies of unidentified soldiers were exhumed from different major battlefields. A high-ranking officer, often blindfolded, would then be led before the identical caskets and would select one by placing a wreath or his hand upon it. The others would be reburied with honor. This ritual guaranteed that no one, not even the selector, could ever know the name, rank, or nationality of the soldier chosen. He could be a general or a private. He could be from any town or city. In that moment of selection, he became everyman. He was your father, your brother, your son. This deliberate erasure of identity is what makes the tomb so powerful. It is a blank slate upon which an entire nation can project its collective memory and grief. Perhaps the most famous of these is the tomb of the unknown soldier in Arlington National Cemetery, United States. The American unknown from World War I was interred on Armistice Day, November 11, 1921. President Warren G. Harding presided over the ceremony, and the tomb was inscribed with the words, "Here rests in honored glory an American soldier known but to God." The site has since become a hallowed ground of national mourning and respect, guarded 24 hours a day, 365 days a year by a specially selected sentinel from the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard. The precision of the guard change ceremony is a breathtaking display of discipline and reverence, each movement choreographed to perfection in a silent, powerful tribute to the nameless individual lying in rest. The tomb is not a static monument. It is a living, breathing institution with the Guard's unwavering vigil symbolizing the nation's perpetual gratitude and commitment to never forgetting its missing. But this is a global tradition. Beneath the Arc de Triomphe in Paris lies the tomb of the unknown soldier, where the eternal flame burns brightly, rekindled every evening at 6:30 in a solemn ceremony. In London, the unknown warrior rests in the far western end of the nave of Westminster Abbey, one of the few people ever granted permission to be buried in the ancient church, his grave marked by a slab of black Belgian marble. These tombs serve as the symbolic heart of national remembrance days. The laying of wreaths by heads of state, the silent parades of veterans, the countless poppies placed by citizens, all these rituals converge at these graves, giving a physical location for a nation's otherwise intangible sorrow. They are places where a wife who never found her husband, a child who never knew their father, or a parent who lost a son can finally go to pay their respects, believing that this could perhaps be their loved one. The enigma of these tombs is their ultimate, unanswerable question. We will never know who lies within, and that is precisely the point. Their power is derived from their anonymity. They reclaim the individual soldiers lost to history and grant them a collective identity of supreme honor. They transform a statistic, a number among millions, into a powerful human symbol. They answer the agony of not knowing with a permanent, dignified certainty. Someone is home, someone is being watched over, honored, and remembered. In a world that often glorifies the famous and the named, these tombs stand as a timeless reminder that the greatest sacrifices are often made by those whose names we will never know, and that their legacy is no less important for its anonymity. They are the silent, beating heart of a nation's memory. Yet this grim custom of compulsory accompaniment was not reserved for the highest-ranking courtiers alone. The first emperor's meticulous plans for the afterlife extended his control over the very fabric of his court, weaving a final, tragic tapestry that included scores of women who had shared his life. While the main tomb mound remains sealed, tantalizing clues from history and archaeology point to a separate, somber burial complex that reveals one of the dynasty's most chilling practices. Historical records, particularly the writings of the Han Dynasty scholar Sima Qian, provide a stark account. He noted that after the emperor's death, his son and successor, the second emperor Hu Hai, issued a devastating decree. He declared it would be inappropriate for the childless concubines of the late emperor to be free, and ordered that they should not be released from the palace but should instead accompany their lord in death. This was not a spontaneous act of cruelty, but a calculated act of state policy cloaked in the language of ritual duty. The scale of this act is almost impossible to fathom. The number of women reported to have been interred varies in different historical accounts, with some suggesting a figure in the thousands, though this may be an exaggeration meant to emphasize the horror. Regardless of the precise number, the principle remains the same. These women, who had lived within the secluded confines of the inner palace, found their fates irrevocably tied to the emperor's passing. For those who had borne him children, there was perhaps a reprieve, a life allowed to continue in service of the royal bloodline. But for those who were childless, their primary purpose, to provide an heir, had gone unfulfilled. In the ruthless logic of the Qin court, this rendered them expendable assets in the grand project of constructing the emperor's eternal dominion. Their lives in this world were deemed less valuable than their perceived service in the next. Archaeology has provided haunting, tangible evidence that corroborates these ancient texts. In the late 1970s, a significant discovery was made in the eastern sector of the extensive mausoleum complex, about 1.5 kilometers from the main tomb mound. Here, excavators uncovered a cluster of tombs that were markedly different from the pits containing the Terracotta Army or the officials. These graves were modest in construction but profound in their emotional weight. Within them, researchers found the remains of a large number of young women. The skeletons showed no signs of violent trauma like those of the murdered princes, but the arrangement and the context spoke volumes. Many of the bodies were found with exquisite personal ornaments, fine jewelry, hairpins, and other delicate accessories, indicating they were individuals of status, likely the emperor's consorts. The absence of any evidence of struggle suggests that their passing may have been through a method like poisoning, a quiet, regimented end rather than a violent slaughter. To understand this practice, we must step into a worldview that is utterly foreign to our modern sensibilities. This was not seen as simple murder by the Qin rulers. It was a sacred, albeit terrifying, obligation. The emperor was not merely a political leader. He was the axis mundi, the divine pivot between heaven and earth. His well-being in the afterlife was considered essential for the continued stability and prosperity of the entire state. The ancient Chinese conception of the afterlife was not a paradise of rest, but a shadowy continuation of the earthly hierarchy. A sovereign would need his entire court apparatus to function effectively in that realm: his officials, his soldiers, his servants, and his consorts. These women were not being killed out of pure spite. They were being dispatched to perform their duties for all eternity, to ensure the emperor lacked for nothing. It was the ultimate expression of a system that viewed the individual as entirely subservient to the needs of the state and the cosmic order, a belief so powerful it could mandate death on an industrial scale. This separate burial ground stands as a silent, heartbreaking testament to the countless anonymous lives that were sacrificed to fuel one man's quest for immortality, a stark reminder that the brilliance of the Terracotta Army was cast by a very dark shadow. And so we journey from the dynastic rituals of ancient China to the wind-swept plains of northeastern France, where a recent discovery has completely upended our understanding of another warrior culture, one often shrouded in myth and Roman propaganda, the Celts. For centuries, the popular image of the Iron Age Celts or Gauls has been shaped by their enemies' accounts, fierce, mustachioed barbarians living in hill forts, more concerned with battle than with high culture or long-distance commerce. But in 2015, in the small village of Lavaux, a team from the French National Institute for Preventive Archaeological Research made a find that shattered that simplistic image to pieces. This was not a grave of a simple chieftain. It was the lavish, cosmopolitan tomb of a figure archaeologists have dubbed the Celtic Prince of Lavaux. The discovery was made during a routine survey ahead of a planned commercial development, a testament to the incredible importance of preventative archaeology. What they began to uncover was a massive burial mound nearly 40 meters across, a monument that had dominated the landscape in the 5th century BC. At its heart, they found a 14-square-meter burial chamber remarkably preserved, and inside that chamber was the central, stunning spectacle, a two-wheeled chariot, and within it the skeletal remains of a single individual. This was an inhumation burial where the body is laid out whole, a practice that stands in contrast to the cremations common in other Celtic regions. The man was adorned with fine jewelry that immediately signaled his supreme status, most notably a beautiful torque, a rigid neck ring made of solid gold, expertly crafted and weighing nearly 600 grams. This was no mere chieftain, this was a ruler of immense, almost divine authority, but the chariot and the gold were just the opening act. As the archaeologists carefully excavated the chamber, they realized the true treasure lay around the body. The prince was surrounded by a funerary feast of staggering opulence and international flair. The centerpiece of this banquet for the afterlife was a magnificent bronze cauldron, nearly a meter in diameter. This was not a local product. Its handles were exquisitely decorated with the horned head of the Greek god Aeolus, the river god, a masterpiece of classical Greek metalwork. The cauldron was rimmed with 8 decorative lioness heads, and inside it was a fine blackware ceramic wine jug, known as an oinocho, which was unmistakably from Greece or one of its Italian colonies. This jug itself was a work of art, decorated with a gilded silver rim and a scene at its base showing the god Dionysus reclining under a vine beneath a woman and a satyr. This assemblage of Mediterranean luxury goods is what makes the Lavaux tomb a true game-changer. Each object tells a story of connections that stretched across the entire European continent. The Greek pottery and the bronze cauldron did not find their way to the heart of Celtic France by accident. They are proof positive of a sophisticated, long-distance trade network, a chain of contact and exchange that linked the hallowed halls of Athenian workshops to the powerful chieftains of the Hallstatt and Latin cultures in temperate Europe. The Celts were not isolated, they were active participants in a pan-European economy. They had something the sophisticated city-states of the Mediterranean wanted desperately: raw materials. In exchange for this exquisite finished luxury goods, the Celts likely traded vital commodities like tin, amber, gold, and perhaps even slaves. The Celtic prince was not just a consumer of foreign bling, he was a key node in an ancient globalizing network controlling the flow of goods and wealth into his territory. The purpose of this imported finery was deeply symbolic. This was more than just showing off wealth. It was a powerful demonstration of the prince's authority and his divine right to rule. The wine service set is particularly telling. The Greek symposium was a ritualized drinking party for elite men, a cornerstone of political and social life in the Mediterranean. By incorporating this very specific cultural kit into his burial, the Prince of Lavaux was doing something profound. He was appropriating a foreign symbol of power and adapting it to a local context. He was showing his people that he understood the ways of the wider, sophisticated world and could command its treasures. The cauldron, a symbol of abundance and the otherworld in Celtic myth, repurposed with Greek iconography, becomes a perfect fusion of two worlds. It suggests a leader who was both deeply Celtic in his identity and consciously cosmopolitan in his tastes, using imported goods to legitimize and elevate his rule at home. The tomb at Lavaux forces us to see the Celts not as the barbarians at the gate of Rome, but as a complex, sophisticated, and interconnected society with its own powerful elites who participated in a dialogue of luxury and power that spanned the ancient world. But our journey now takes us far from the courts of warrior princes and into the very dawn of human society, to a time when our ancestors were taking their first tentative steps out of a nomadic existence and into a new way of life. In a small cave in the hills of northern Israel, a discovery was made that offers a profoundly intimate glimpse into the spiritual mind of the earliest settled communities, and it centers on the burial of a woman who may be one of the oldest ritual specialists ever found. This is the 12,000-year-old tomb of the Natufian shaman. The site is Hilazan Taktit Cave, and the burial, designated Tomb 17, was excavated in 2005 and 8. It stood out immediately from the other 27 graves at the site. While the others were simple, this one was a carefully engineered structure. The Natufian people had carved a special oval-shaped pit into the cave floor specifically for her. Its walls were lined with limestone slabs, and its bottom was plastered with a layer of soft yellow clay, creating a clean, prepared space for her final rest. She was placed in a peculiar position on her side with her spine curved, her legs spread and bent at the knees. This unusual arrangement suggests she may have been tightly bound or wrapped in a shroud when she was interred, perhaps to contain her powerful spirit or to mimic a fetal position, symbolizing a return to the earth or a readiness for rebirth. It was the collection of objects placed with her, however, that truly stunned archaeologists and pointed to her unique status. This was not a simple collection of everyday tools. Laid carefully around and on top of her body was a truly bizarre and symbolic assemblage of animal parts. They included the complete shells of 50 tortoises, the pelvis of a leopard, the wing of a golden eagle, the tail of a wild cow, the skulls of 2 stone martens, and the forearm of a wild boar. This was not a random collection of bones. It was a curated toolkit of power animals, each likely chosen for its specific symbolic properties in the Natufian worldview. The tortoises, for instance, might have represented longevity and the earth, their shells perhaps used as rattles or bowls in ceremonies. The eagle, a powerful predator that soars between the earthly and spiritual realms, is a nearly universal symbol of shamanic travel. The leopard, a rare and formidable predator, could have symbolized ferocity and otherworldly power. The woman herself provides another layer to the story. Analysis of her skeleton revealed she was petite, about 45 years old, and had lived a life marked by severe deformity and chronic pain. She had a spinal malformation that would have caused a visible limp and likely constant discomfort. She also had a misshapen pelvis and was completely toothless, which would have drastically altered her facial structure and made her diet dependent on others. In a small-scale hunter-gatherer society transitioning to settlement, where physical ability was paramount, her survival to middle age is a powerful indicator that she was cared for and valued not despite her differences but perhaps because of them. Her physical distinctiveness may have been interpreted not as a disability, but as a sign of a unique connection to the spirit world, setting her apart from the rest of the community. This convergence of evidence, the specially built tomb, the unique burial position, the extraordinary grave goods of potent animal symbols, and her own physical uniqueness, has led researchers to a compelling conclusion. This woman was almost certainly a shaman. She would have been a vital ritual specialist, a bridge between the community and the unseen forces that governed their world. In a period of immense social change, as people began to live in larger, more permanent villages for the first time, new social tensions and questions would have arisen. A person like her would have provided explanations, mediated conflicts, healed the sick, and perhaps conducted rituals to ensure successful hunts or foraging trips. Her burial with these specific items was likely meant to equip her with everything she would need to continue her vital work in the afterlife, ensuring her community's spiritual protection even after her death. The true significance of Hilazan Taktit is its profound antiquity. This burial dates to over 12,000 years ago, placing it firmly in the pre-pottery Neolithic era, a time just before the dawn of full-scale agriculture. It forces us to completely re-evaluate the origins of social complexity and religious practice. It shows that before organized religion, before temples, and before written scripture, humans had already developed sophisticated spiritual beliefs and recognized specific individuals as intermediaries to the supernatural. This isn't the tomb of a queen who ruled by birthright or a warrior who ruled by strength. It is the tomb of a woman who likely commanded immense respect through her knowledge, her perceived connection to the spirit world, and the vital role she played in the psychological well-being of her people. She represents the deepest roots of human spirituality, a testament to the fact that our search for meaning and our need for healers and guides is as ancient as settled life itself. From the ancient spiritual world of a Natufian shaman, we leap forward millennia to the absolute zenith of European earthly power and its obsession with eternal legacy. We arrive in France at the height of the Baroque age, to a monarch who believed himself the center of the universe, a living sun around which all of France and indeed all of Europe revolved. This is the story of Louis XIV, the Sun King, and the tomb meant to hold his glory for all time, a tomb that would become a central target in a revolution that sought to erase everything he stood for. His journey after death is a tale of unparalleled grandeur, violent desecration, and a final, haunting mystery. Louis's relationship with death and immortality was a complex and public performance that played out over his entire 72-year reign. He transformed the royal chateau of Versailles from a simple hunting lodge into a sprawling, breathtaking palace that was both his home and a stage for a never-ending theatrical production of his own power. Every aspect of court life, from his waking up in the morning, known as the lever, to his going to bed at night, the coucher, was a public ritual designed to reinforce his divine right to rule. He surrounded himself with symbols of the sun, Apollo, and eternal glory in the palace's art and architecture, creating a world seemingly outside of time. Yet, for all this focus on eternal radiance, Louis was intensely aware of his own mortality. He outlived his son, his grandson, and most of his closest family, leaving his 5-year-old great-grandson to inherit the throne. This profound personal loss forced him to confront the fragility of his own bloodline and the future of his absolute monarchy. His chosen place of eternal rest was not Versailles, but the ancient and sacred Basilica of Saint Denis, located just north of Paris. For centuries, Saint Denis had served as the traditional necropolis for the kings and queens of France, a stone-carved genealogy of the monarchy. Louis XIV commissioned a monumental project to completely redesign the royal chapel and the crypts beneath it, wanting a mausoleum worthy of his legacy. He entrusted this task to his great architect Jules Hardouin Mansart, the same man who had given Versailles its most iconic features. The result was a masterpiece of Baroque funerary art. The centerpiece was a magnificent dark marble balustrade that encircled the sanctuary directly above the crypt, a symbolic connection between the living church above and the dead royalty below. Within the crypt itself, the tombs were to be grand and orderly, a final, permanent court for the Sun King and his family. His own tomb was designed to be the focal point, an imposing structure that would forever mark him as the greatest of all French monarchs. When Louis finally died on September 1st, 1715, after a reign that had defined a century, the ritual of his burial was as elaborate as one would expect. His body was embalmed, a process that for a king involved removing the heart and entrails for separate burial, a tradition known as dilaceratio corporis, or the division of the body. His heart was entombed at the Church of St. Paul St. Louis in Paris, and his entrails were placed at Notre Dame Cathedral. His main body, however, was transported with immense pomp to St. Denis. The funeral procession was a somber, majestic spectacle, a final parade for the king. He was interred in a lead coffin within the grand, newly completed crypt placed alongside his ancestors. For over 75 years, he rested there in splendor, his tomb a site of pilgrimage and a powerful symbol of the Bourbon dynasty's divine right and permanence. Then came the Revolution. In 1789, the French Revolution erupted, fueled by decades of inequality, famine, and resentment towards the absolute monarchy Louis XIV had perfected. The revolutionaries sought to dismantle the ancient regime in its entirety, and that meant systematically destroying its most potent symbols, in a radical act of political violence aimed at erasing the very memory of royalty. The National Convention issued a decree in 1793 to destroy the royal tombs at St. Denis. Over a period of several days in October of that year, a grim and chaotic spectacle unfolded inside the basilica. Workmen, under orders from the revolutionary government, used sledgehammers and crowbars to break open the centuries-old sarcophagi. The remains of kings, queens, and princes were pulled from their coffins and unceremoniously dumped into two large pits dug in the churchyard outside. The lead from the coffins was melted down to make bullets for the revolutionary armies, and the bones were covered with quicklime to accelerate their decomposition. It was an act of profound desecration intended to sever France's link to its monarchical past forever. The Sun King's carefully planned eternity was violently undone in a matter of hours, his remains tossed into a mass grave with those of the very ancestors he had sought to surpass. But the story of his physical remains takes an even stranger turn. After the fall of Napoleon and the restoration of the monarchy in the early 19th century, King Louis XVIII ordered a pious mission to try and reassemble the scattered remains of his predecessors. In 1817, workers exhumed the two mass graves at St. Denis. The task was grisly and nearly impossible. The quicklime had done its job, and the bones were completely commingled and largely dissolved. It was hopeless to try and separate one set of royal remains from another. With a sense of solemn reverence mixed with horror, all the recovered bone fragments were gathered together and placed in a single, large ossuary within the restored crypt of St. Denis. They are housed there today in a quiet, solemn space arranged by dynasty but utterly anonymous. A simple plaque lists the names of the monarchs whose dust is contained within. So, the final, ironic fate of Louis XIV, the king who insisted on his own unique and glorious individuality above all else, was to become forever anonymous, his physical essence merged for all time with the very lineage he ruled over. He rests not as a singular Sun King, but as one particle in a collective cloud of French history, a final, humbling end for a man who spent his life ensuring he would never be forgotten. Yet, even as the French Revolution sought to obliterate the physical remains of kings, an ancient civilization on the other side of the world had pursued a very different dream, not the erasure of the body, but its perfect, eternal preservation. We travel now to ancient China, to the powerful Han Dynasty, which ruled for over 4 centuries around 2,000 years ago. This was an era of immense wealth, cultural refinement, and profound spiritual beliefs about the afterlife, beliefs that produced one of the most extraordinary and visually stunning burial practices in all of human history. The Han elite were not buried in simple coffins. They were encased in cosmic armor, meticulously crafted from one of the most revered materials in Chinese culture, jade. The concept behind the jade burial suit is as breathtaking in its ambition as it is in its craftsmanship. The Han Dynasty aristocracy believed that jade possessed powerful magical properties. It was not merely a precious stone, it was considered a conduit of spiritual energy, a substance that could ward off evil spirits and, most importantly, protect the physical body from decay. They thought that by preserving the corporeal form, the soul would have a permanent home, thus achieving a form of physical immortality in the afterlife. This was the ultimate insurance policy for eternity, and it resulted in the creation of the ultimate funerary garment, a full bodysuit composed of thousands of small, finely polished jade plaques, meticulously connected by threads of precious gold, silver, or silk. The sheer scale of the undertaking to create just one of these suits is almost unimaginable. Each suit was custom-made for its owner, requiring an enormous quantity of raw jade. The stone itself is incredibly hard and difficult to work, even with modern tools. Han craftsmen would have had to painstakingly shape each individual plaque using abrasive sands and drills, a process that would have taken thousands of hours of labor for a single suit. The plaques were then drilled with tiny holes so they could be laced together. The choice of threading material was itself a status symbol. Emperors and the highest-ranking nobles were buried in suits sewn with gold thread. Those of slightly lower rank used silver thread, and still others used silk or copper. The final product was a heavy, rigid, and astronomically expensive cocoon of stone, a second skin designed to last forever. For a long time, these suits were known only from ancient historical texts. They were considered mythical, fantastical stories that seemed too extravagant to be true. That changed dramatically in 1968, when archaeologists working in Hebei province made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the archaeological world. They uncovered two completely intact Han Dynasty tombs, later identified as the resting places of Prince Liu Sheng and his wife, Du Wan. Liu Sheng was the son of Emperor Jing and a half-brother to the famous Emperor Wu, placing him at the absolute zenith of Han society. His tomb, carved deep into a mountainside, was a microcosm of his earthly life, filled with everything he would need for the afterlife: chariots, vessels, and an army of terracotta attendants. But the centerpiece of the discovery was the prince himself. There, in the inner chamber, lay the complete skeleton of Liu Sheng, still encased within his magnificent jade burial suit. The suit itself was a masterpiece composed of 2,698 rectangular plates of nephrite jade, each polished to a smooth sheen and linked together with an estimated 2 pounds of fine gold thread. His wife, Du Wan, was found in a similar suit of 2,156 jade plaques, also connected with gold thread. Seeing these suits in a museum today is a humbling experience. They have a weighty, solemn presence, the cool green stone, and the glint of gold speaking of an almost incomprehensible investment of resources and belief. They are not just artifacts, they are physical manifestations of an ancient, unwavering hope to cheat death itself. Yet, for all their grandeur and the profound faith invested in them, the jade suits ultimately failed in their primary purpose. The bodies inside did not defy decay. They returned to dust, leaving behind the exquisite stone shells that had been meant to protect them. The skeletons of Liu Sheng and Du Wan were found completely decomposed, with the jade suits lying flat around their outlines. The ancient belief in jade's preservative power was a powerful motivator, but it was not a scientific reality. This poignant failure, however, does not diminish their significance. In fact, it makes them even more powerful as historical objects. They tell us less about the science of preservation and more about the human heart, about the universal, desperate longing for permanence, the desire of a powerful elite to project their status into the next world, and the incredible artistic and economic heights a civilization will reach in the service of its deepest spiritual convictions. The jade suits stand as a beautiful, melancholic monument to a dream that was never realized, a dream of immortality woven in stone and gold. Now we venture into a realm where archaeology collides directly with legend, and where a single discovery can ignite a firestorm of controversy that burns across centuries. In the vast, arid landscapes of Saudi Arabia, a tale emerged that seems ripped from the pages of myth: the discovery of a tomb housing the remains of a being of impossible size. This is the story of the so-called Tomb of the Unknown Giant, a narrative that taps into one of humanity's most enduring and widespread legends. The account, which has circulated primarily through alternative history circles and sensationalist media, describes the unearthing of an ancient burial chamber. Within it, allegedly, was a skeleton of colossal proportions, with reports suggesting a height stretching well over 12 feet. Such a find, if verified, would be nothing short of revolutionary, appearing to provide tangible, physical evidence for the giants that stalk the pages of so many cultural traditions. From the Nephilim of the Hebrew Bible, the mysterious offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men, to the titans of Greek mythology and the gigantic jinn of Arabian folklore, stories of a race of giants are a near-universal constant in our ancient stories. For those who believe these are historical accounts rather than mere allegories, a discovery like this would be the ultimate vindication, the smoking gun that rewrites human history. This is where the story fractures into two distinct paths. The first, often promoted by conspiracy theorists and some religious literalists, suggests such discoveries are not just real, but are actively covered up by mainstream scientific institutions and governments. The motive for this alleged suppression is typically framed as a desire to protect the established historical narrative, which posits that Homo sapiens have been the only large-bodied hominins for tens of thousands of years. The existence of a separate, gigantic species of human, the theory goes, would undermine scientific authority and empower religious texts, a prospect certain powerful groups would supposedly go to great lengths to prevent. Stories often claim that evidence is seized, sites are bulldozed, and discoverers are silenced, adding a layer of intrigue and secrecy that makes the tale even more compelling to believers. The second path, the one followed by mainstream archaeology and paleontology, offers a far more grounded yet still fascinating explanation. The field of archaeology has a long and unfortunate history of being duped by misidentified remains. A common culprit is the fossils of prehistoric megafauna. The massive, human-like femur of a woolly mammoth or a steppe bison, when found out of context and without the rest of the skeleton, can be easily mistaken for a giant human leg bone by an untrained eye. This phenomenon is not new. Historically, the large bones of extinct animals were often interpreted as the remains of cyclopes, dragons, and giants by ancient cultures who had no framework for understanding deep time or extinction. Furthermore, there are genuine medical and genetic conditions that can result in extreme human stature. Gigantism, typically caused by a pituitary tumor that leads to an overproduction of growth hormone, can result in individuals reaching heights of 7, 8, or even close to 9 feet. Acromegaly, a related condition that occurs after the growth plates have closed, can cause a progressive enlargement of the hands, feet, and facial features, giving a person a truly formidable and robust appearance. Throughout history, individuals with these conditions would have been extraordinary anomalies, likely viewed with a mixture of fear, reverence, and awe. Upon their death, the burial of such a person would naturally involve a larger-than-average coffin or burial shroud. Centuries later, the discovery of their skeleton, with its dramatically enlarged bones, could easily be misinterpreted as belonging to a different species entirely, a giant from a forgotten age. The true enigma of the tomb of the unknown giant, then, may not be the skeleton itself, but our powerful, innate desire for it to be real. The legend speaks to something deep within the human psyche, a fascination with the idea that the world was once a more epic, more dangerous, and more magical place, inhabited by beings of immense power whose stories were passed down as faint echoes in our myths. We are drawn to the possibility that our ancestors were not merely storytellers, but were recording a lost history of the world. This longing can sometimes override our critical faculties, transforming a misidentified mammoth bone or the sad remains of a person with a medical condition into proof of a mythical race. The tomb, whether it exists as described or not, stands as a powerful symbol of this clash, a clash not between science and religion, but between our boundless imagination and the often more mundane, yet still incredible, truths of the physical evidence we unearth from the past. Yet, even as we ponder the mysteries of myth and medicine, we turn to a discovery that feels startlingly personal, a tomb that seems to offer a direct window into the mind of one of history's most enigmatic figures. Our journey takes us now to the rolling chalklands of southern England, to a site near the village of Deal in Kent. Here, in 2008, archaeologists excavating an Iron Age burial mound made a find that sent a ripple of excitement through the academic world. For within this grave, dating to the decades just before the Roman conquest, lay the remains of a woman surrounded by a collection of objects so unique and so symbolic that many believe she may be the first Druid ever discovered. The burial itself was a statement of importance. She was laid to rest in a large, timber-lined chamber set within a circular ditch and bank, a structure meant to be seen and remembered. But it was the artifacts placed with her that defined her life's work. Unlike the warrior graves of the period, filled with swords and shields, her grave goods spoke of knowledge, ritual, and a connection to realms beyond the physical. Most striking was a set of fine surgical instruments, including a bronze and iron scalpel, a sharpened spoon for lifting tissue, and a set of probes. These were not crude tools, they were the precise, specialized instruments of a healer, someone who practiced with a sophisticated understanding of the human body. Alongside them was a large, smooth stone, its surface worn from repeated use, likely for grinding herbs into medicinal powders and poultices. This was the toolkit of a physician, a person entrusted with the physical well-being of their community. But her role extended far beyond the physical. Also nestled beside her were the instruments of a seer. There was a collection of metal rods suitable for a form of divination known as rhabdomancy, the practice of casting sticks and interpreting their patterns to foretell the future. Most breathtaking, however, was a simple, everyday object transformed into an item of profound spiritual significance, a worn, well-used bronze mirror. To the Celts, mirrors were not merely vanity items, they were believed to be portals to the other world. A druid might use one for scrying, staring into its polished surface to see visions, communicate with ancestors, or perceive truths hidden from normal sight. This single object powerfully links her to the mystical traditions that classical writers like Julius Caesar and Cicero attributed to the Druids, describing them as philosophers, judges, and masters of divination. Perhaps the most telling clue to her immense status, however, lies in a small, seemingly mundane item, a single, weathered cowrie shell. This shell did not come from the shores of Britain. It is a species native to the warm waters of the Red Sea or the Gulf of Aden, thousands of miles from the chalk cliffs of Kent. In a world before global trade networks, this tiny object was an exotic treasure, a direct link to a world of which her people could only dream. Its presence in her grave signifies she was no ordinary village wise woman. She was a person of such immense prestige that she had access to the most rare and valuable goods coming into Britain through long-distance trade networks likely controlled by the elite. She moved in the highest circles of Celtic society, her counsel sought by chieftains and kings. This convergence of evidence paints a vivid portrait of a multifaceted intellectual leader. She was a healer, a surgeon, a pharmacist, a diviner, and a philosopher. She treated the body with her scalpels and herbs, and she treated the soul with her divination rods and mirror. She was a bridge between the everyday world and the spiritual realm, and her knowledge granted her a status that transcended the typical roles of her society. For centuries, the Druids have been figures of legend described by their enemies and romanticized by later generations. They left no written records of their own, and their teachings were an oral tradition that died with them. This grave, however, offers something far more valuable than a legend. It offers a set of tools held by a single pair of hands. It gives us a name for this powerful combination of roles. While we can never know her true name or title, the weight of the evidence makes a compelling case that we are looking at the archaeological footprint of a druid. She embodies the very definition of that role, a learned individual who held the well-being of her people in her hands, mediating between the physical and the spiritual to maintain the balance of her world, a balance she was equipped to maintain even in the life to come. But from the high-status realm of a potential druid, we plunge into a much darker, more fearful chapter of human history, a time not of learning and light, but of rampant disease and deep-seated superstition. We travel now to the small, rural village of Drosko in 17th century Poland, a community gripped by a terror that stalked them not in life but from beyond the grave. Here, archaeological excavations have uncovered a cemetery that tells a silent, chilling story of a society so terrified of the dead that they felt compelled to take drastic, and to our modern eyes, brutal measures to ensure they stayed that way. This is the story of the so-called vampire of Drosko, a skeleton that offers a haunting window into the medieval mind confronting the inexplicable horror of the plague. The discovery was made in 2008 when archaeologists from the University of South Alabama and Michigan State University were carefully excavating a post-medieval cemetery. Among the dozens of typical Christian burials, one grave stood out in stark, macabre contrast. The skeleton, identified as that of an adult woman in her 30s, was found in a supine position, but her burial was anything but peaceful. Placed squarely across her neck was a large iron sickle, its curved blade positioned so that if she had tried to sit up, the sharp edge would have sliced deeply into her throat. Even more disturbingly, a large, heavy rock had been wedged tightly under her chin, pressing her jaw shut, and a smaller stone was thrust directly into her mouth. This was not a casual arrangement of grave goods. This was a deliberate, calculated act of immobilization and mutilation performed on a corpse. To understand this terrifying practice, we must step away from our modern, Hollywood-inspired image of the vampire and into the grim reality of 17th century rural life. The people of Drosko were not fearing a charismatic, caped count. They were fearing their own neighbors, friends, and family members. The concept of the vampire or upia in Slavic folklore was born from a desperate need to explain the unexplainable, specifically the rapid and terrifying spread of infectious disease. Communities would be struck by a mysterious illness that would carry off person after person. In an era with no knowledge of germ theory, the only logical explanation to a pre-scientific mind was that the most recent person to die had not stayed dead. They believed this individual had returned from the grave, a revenant, to slowly drain the life force from their surviving loved ones, causing them to sicken and die in turn. The methods used on the woman in Drosko were classic apotropaic or anti-demonic practices designed to prevent this very scenario. Each element of her burial had a specific, terrifying purpose. The sickle across the throat was a brutal safeguard. The belief was that a vampire or revenant would first sit up in its coffin. The strategically placed blade was meant to decapitate or severely injure the corpse as it moved, rendering it incapable of rising further to prey upon the living. The stone forced into the mouth served a dual purpose. It was meant to prevent the creature from biting or feeding, its primary method of attack. But on a more symbolic level, it was also intended to starve it. A common folk belief held that vampires could sustain themselves by chewing on their own burial shrouds or even their own flesh. The rock prevented this ghoulish consumption, theoretically leading the monster to starve and remain inert. What is particularly fascinating is the forensic analysis of the woman herself. She was not some mysterious outsider. Isotopic analysis of her dental enamel revealed she was a local, born and raised in the Drosko area. This shatters any notion of a stranger bringing evil to the community. The threat in their eyes came from within. So why was she singled out for this treatment? The most plausible explanation lies in the order of deaths during a plague outbreak. If she was one of the first to die from a sudden illness, she would naturally become the prime suspect when others subsequently fell sick. Her death may have been unusual or sudden, marking her as different. In a society searching for a cause, she became the scapegoat, the first link in a deadly chain that had to be broken by any means necessary. Her story is not unique. Across Poland and throughout Eastern Europe, similar, deviant burials have been found from this period, often coinciding with known cholera or plague epidemics. Other methods included decapitation and placing the head between the legs, staking the body through the heart or abdomen, binding the corpse tightly with ropes, or burying the individual face down so that any movement would only dig them deeper into the earth. The Drosko burial, with its sickle and stones, is one of the most vivid and well-documented examples of this widespread practice. It represents a profound and heartbreaking human response to catastrophe. It was not an act of hatred, but rather an act of desperate communal self-preservation. In a time of utter helplessness, these rituals gave people a sense of control, a way to fight back against an invisible enemy. They were trying to save their families and their community by ensuring that one of their own, transformed by death into a monster, could do them no further harm. Yet even as the jade suits of Liu Sheng and Du Wan speak of a grand, failed ambition for immortality, another Han Dynasty tomb would be discovered just a few years later, one that achieved the unimaginable. This tomb did not preserve its occupant with stone, but with a perfection of natural conditions so rare and precise that it gave the modern world a face-to-face encounter with a 2,000-year-old woman. We journey now to Hunan Province, China, to the year 1971, where construction workers digging an air raid shelter for a hospital near Changsha stumbled upon what is arguably the most important archaeological discovery in all of Chinese history, the magnificent, waterlogged, and miraculously preserved tomb of Xinjue, better known to the world as Lady Dai. The initial discovery was confusing. Digging into a hill known as Mawangdui, the workers hit a layer of strange, white pasty clay that damaged their tools. Archaeologists were called in and immediately realized the significance. The clay was a sealant, and beneath it they found a charcoal layer over 20 inches thick, which in turn covered a massive, multi-layered lacquered coffin. This was no ordinary burial mound. It was a sophisticated, airtight preservation system built into the earth. The tomb was designated Mawangdui Tomb No. 1, and as they painstakingly opened it, they were met with a sight that defied all logic. Floating in a slightly acidic, oxygen-free brown liquid within the coffin was the body of a woman, her skin still soft and supple, her limbs still flexible, her features perfectly recognizable. She had not mummified in the dry Egyptian sense. She had been pickled in time. The condition of her body was and remains utterly unprecedented. Pathologists who performed the autopsy were able to do so with almost modern techniques. They found her type of blood still in her veins and more than half of her brain matter still within her skull. They could identify her blood type and study her internal organs, which showed signs of the diseases that plagued her in life. They found 138 melon seeds preserved in her esophagus, stomach, and intestines, a final meal that provided the crucial clue to the exact time of her death. She had passed away in the summer. Most remarkably, they were able to determine her cause of death with a startling degree of certainty. The combination of a coronary thrombosis, a severely blocked coronary artery, and gallstones would have triggered a massive heart attack, likely brought on by a life of extreme luxury and physical inactivity. She was a woman who enjoyed the finest foods, and that very indulgence, preserved by the melon seeds in her gut, is what ultimately killed her. But Lady Di was more than just a medical marvel. Her tomb was a time capsule of staggering richness that painted a vivid portrait of an aristocratic Han Dynasty lady. The tomb's 4 nested coffins were themselves masterpieces of funerary art, each lacquered and painted with intricate scenes of mystical animals and celestial beings, a map of the cosmos guiding her to the afterlife. The contents of the tomb were a catalogue of elite life in the 2nd century BC. There were over 1,000 other artifacts buried with her, including 162 beautifully carved wooden figurines representing her servants and musicians, ready to attend to her every need in the next world. There were exquisite lacquerware dishes still containing expertly prepared meals, 50 pieces of finely woven silk clothing, and a stunningly detailed painted silk banner that draped over her innermost coffin, depicting her journey from the earthly realm to the heavenly paradise of the gods. Perhaps the greatest treasure, however, was a library of silk scrolls found in a separate compartment. These texts were not about Lady Di herself, but about the world she inhabited. They included the earliest known manuscripts of classic Chinese texts like the I Ching and the Tao Te Ching, as well as groundbreaking scientific treatises on astronomy, medicine, and maps that were far more advanced than anyone had believed possible for the era. This was not just the burial of a noblewoman, it was the preservation of an entire intellectual and material culture. Lady Di's body and her tomb thus provide 2 separate, profound windows into the past. The first is intensely personal and biological, a case study of a single human life, her health, her diet, and her final moments. The second is cultural and historical, a panoramic view of the art, science, and luxury of the early Han elite. She grants us an intimacy with history that is unique in all the world. We do not just read about the Han Dynasty. Through her, we can almost touch it, understanding not only how they lived and died, but how they hoped to live forever. Her miraculous preservation serves as the ultimate tribute to the Han belief in the importance of the physical body, achieving in reality what the jade suits could only promise in theory, a tangible, undeniable bridge across 2 millennia. But the search for the Sea People's origins doesn't end with their pottery or their weapons. The very structure of the burials themselves provides another compelling piece of the puzzle. Unlike the Canaanites, who typically used family tombs with multiple generations laid to rest together, the burial practices at this Philistine cemetery are strikingly individualistic. The warriors were often interred alone or in small, discrete groups, a practice that echoes Mycenaean traditions more closely than Levantine ones. Some were even buried with their feet pointed toward the sea, a poignant and perhaps intentional alignment that suggests a deep, enduring connection to the waters from which they came, a final longing gaze toward a lost homeland across the Mediterranean. This unique funerary architecture speaks volumes about their social structure and their worldview, one that prized the individual warrior and his personal journey, perhaps above the collective lineage of the family unit. Yet for all the martial prowess these graves suggest, the tomb also reveals a surprising and deeply human side to these feared invaders. Alongside the weapons, archaeologists discovered a collection of delicate, beautifully crafted cosmetic tools. Small, finely carved ivory spoons, likely used for mixing precious ointments or cosmetics, and exquisite jewelry were found nestled beside daggers and javelins. This combination of the martial and the personal, the brutal and the refined, forces us to see the Sea Peoples not as one-dimensional barbarian hordes, but as a complex culture with its own aesthetic sensibilities and rituals of adornment. A warrior might prepare for battle, but he might also take care to anoint himself with scented oils, a practice known from the Aegean world. These small, intimate objects remind us that these were people with lives beyond the battlefield, with customs of beauty and daily practice that they carried with them across the sea and into their final resting places. The ultimate question, of course, is what brought these warriors from the Aegean world to the shores of Canaan. The prevailing theory, supported by Egyptian records like the inscriptions at Medinet Habu, is that a catastrophic combination of factors, perhaps a perfect storm of climate change, famine, and seismic activity, triggered a mass migration from the collapsing Bronze Age palaces of Greece and Anatolia. These displaced populations, the Sea Peoples, took to the waves not as a unified army, but as a confederation of desperate migrants and opportunistic raiders searching for new land and plunder. They smashed into the eastern Mediterranean coast like a tidal wave, toppling the Hittite Empire, sacking coastal cities like Ugarit, and finally slamming into the one power strong enough to stop them, Egypt under the great pharaoh Ramesses III. His victory over them was monumental, but it did not eradicate them. The warriors buried in this cemetery may well be the descendants of those who survived that defeat, who were settled by the Egyptians as mercenaries to guard their frontier, or who simply carved out a new life for themselves in the cities they had conquered, their distinctive European heritage slowly blending with the Canaanite culture around them over the ensuing centuries. So the tomb of the Sea People stands as a monumental cold case file, a collection of silent evidence waiting to be interpreted. It doesn't give us a name for these warriors or a first-hand account of their voyages, but it provides something arguably more valuable, physical, tangible proof of their journey. Each pottery sherd, each unique weapon, and each carefully arranged skeleton is a word in a story of upheaval, resilience, and cultural collision. This burial ground is the closest we have come to looking into the faces of one of history's greatest enigmas, a people who helped burn down the old world of the Bronze Age and who, from the ashes of that collapse, helped forge the new, interconnected world of the Iron Age. They were the destroyers of empires and the founders of cities, feared invaders who became settled neighbors, and their legacy is written not in papyrus but in the earth itself. But from the clash of empires and the voyages of the Sea Peoples, we descend into a world of profound silence and darkness, to a place where the earth itself has transformed tragedy into breathtaking beauty. Our journey now takes us deep into the heart of Belize, into the labyrinthine depths of a cave known to the modern Maya as Acton Tunashil Muknal, or the Cave of the Crystal Sepulchre. This is not a tomb built by human hands, but a sacred chamber consecrated by the Maya underworld itself, and it is here that we encounter one of the most evocative and haunting burials ever discovered, the silent, sparkling form of the Crystal Maiden. Reaching her is a journey in itself, an adventure that underscores why this site remained hidden for over 1,000 years. To enter a TM cave, as archaeologists call it, you must first wade through a crystal-clear river that flows directly from its mouth, swimming through underwater passages and squeezing between colossal boulders. You are quite literally entering the Maya underworld known as Xibalba, a realm of fear, darkness, and powerful gods. For the ancient Maya, caves were not just geological features. They were living portals to this spiritual realm, places where the veil between the worlds was at its thinnest. It was here, in the absolute darkness and echoing silence, far from the world of the living, that they chose to perform their most vital and desperate rituals. The cave is a sprawling time capsule. As you move deeper inside, beyond the initial water passages, the cavern opens up. The floor is littered with the remnants of these ceremonies, pottery vessels, some left whole, others ritually killed by having a hole punched through them to release their spiritual essence. There are grinding stones for preparing offerings and the scattered bones of animals used in sacrifice. But the deepest chamber, the true heart of the cave, is something else entirely. This is where the Maya brought their most precious offerings, human lives. The skeletal remains of at least 14 individuals, men, women, and children, have been found in this inner sanctum. They are believed to be sacrificial victims, offerings to the gods in a time of unimaginable crisis, and among them one skeleton shines with an unearthly light. She is known as the Crystal Maiden, though analysis shows she was likely a young man in his late teens or early 20s. The misnomer has stuck, a testament to the almost fairy tale quality of her discovery. Her skeleton is complete and lies on its back on the cave floor, exactly as it was left centuries ago. The skull is distorted with a massive, fatal crushing blow, clear evidence of the violent sacrifice that ended her life. But time and the unique environment of the cave have performed their own magic. Over the centuries, water rich with dissolved minerals has slowly dripped from the cave ceiling onto her bones. As each drop evaporates, it leaves behind a tiny deposit of calcite crystal. The process has encased her entire skeleton in a glittering, ethereal sheath of sparkling white and beige crystals. In the beam of a headlamp, she seems to glow from within, a constellation of light in the profound darkness. The context of her death points to a period of profound desperation for the Maya civilization. The classic Maya collapse, which occurred between the 8th and 9th centuries, was not a single event but a slow-motion catastrophe. A series of devastating, prolonged droughts crippled the agricultural foundation of their society. The rain god Chak had seemingly turned his back on them. In their anguish, the Maya priests would have journeyed to this, the most powerful place they knew, to beg for his favor. They ventured into the belly of the earth, the source of water and life, to make the ultimate offering. The sacrifice of this young person and the others in the chamber was not an act of mere cruelty. It was the most extreme form of prayer, a desperate attempt to restore balance to a world that was dying around them. They were sending a messenger directly to the gods, a life in exchange for the life-giving rain. Today, the Crystal Maiden rests exactly where she fell. The cave is now a protected archaeological site, and visitors are led by guides who emphasize the sacredness of the place. To see her is a humbling and deeply moving experience. She is a figure of terrible beauty, a stark reminder of the human cost of environmental change and the extreme measures a society will take when faced with extinction. Her sparkling bones are not just a geological curiosity, they are a permanent record of faith, fear, and a final, heartbreaking plea to the heavens, forever frozen in the silent, sacred dark of